The loan officer looked up from her screen, and I remember the exact second her face changed. It was subtle, just a small tightening around her eyes, the way someone looks when they're trying to figure out how to say something they don't want to say. She was a young woman, maybe 26, 27, with reading glasses pushed up on top of her head, and a little American flag pin on her blazer lapel. Her name was Tiffany. I remember thinking that was an interesting name for someone who was about to crack my entire life open like an egg. She turned the monitor toward me slowly, like she wasn't sure I could handle what was on it. And when I saw what was on that screen, I think a part of me left my body. My name wasn't there. After 7 years of marriage, 2 incomes, 1 miscarriage, and a mortgage we'd signed together at the same kitchen table, where we'd eaten breakfast every single morning, my name wasn't on it. But his mother's was. And that was the day I realized my husband hadn't just been lying to me. He'd been building an exit plan for years. While I cried alone in a hospital bathroom. While I picked up extra shifts at work so we could save money faster. While I really, genuinely believed that we were building something together. I want to tell you this story from the beginning. Because if I only tell you what happened in that loan office, you'll think this is just a story about a man hiding money. But it's not. It's about something much colder than that. Before I get into all of it, I just want to say, wherever you're watching from right now, I'm so glad you're here. I mean that. Drop your city or your country in the comments below. I love knowing where you all are. We've got people listening from all over, and honestly, that community is what makes me keep talking. If this is your first time finding this channel, welcome. This channel exists because of you. Every single person who hits subscribe keeps this space alive, and I do not take that lightly. So if this story is hitting something in you, please subscribe. And if you know someone who's been through something like this, someone who stayed too long, who trusted too much, who gave everything and got silence in return, share this with them. They need it. We are just getting started here, and I promise you, none of us saw where this was going. Not even me. And I lived it. My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old, and at the time all of this started unraveling, I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a 4-bedroom house in a neighborhood called Ballantyne. The kind of neighborhood where people wave at each other from their driveways, where the HOA sends emails about which color you're allowed to paint your shutters, where everyone's got a Ring doorbell and a Labrador, and a subscription to a meal kit service they never actually use. I had grown up not far from Charlotte, in a smaller town about 40 minutes south, in a house my parents owned. My dad was a general contractor. My mom worked part-time at a pediatric clinic. We weren't rich, but we were solid. There was always food. There was always warmth. My dad used to say, a man's house is his handshake. Meaning, the way you take care of your home tells people everything they need to know about your character. He passed away when I was 26. Heart attack, very sudden, no warning. I still don't talk about it easily. I met Jake when I was 27, a year after losing my dad. I'll be honest with you, I was not in the best place. I was grieving and I was working too hard, and I was lonely in that particular way you get when you've lost a parent, and the world just keeps moving, and everyone around you seems to have no idea that something fundamental has shifted. Jake was warm. He was easy to talk to. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, like what you were saying actually mattered to him. He was 31 when we met. He worked in commercial real estate, acquisitions, and property management, and he knew a lot about how money moved. He talked about investments the way my dad used to talk about foundations, like they were the thing you built everything else on top of. I was drawn to that. I wanted someone who thought about the future the way I did. We dated for 2 years. Got engaged in Asheville. He proposed on a trail overlook the Blue Ridge Mountains behind us, the most beautiful November afternoon I'd ever seen. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. We got married in the spring. It was a small wedding, about 60 people, outdoor ceremony at a vineyard outside of Charlotte, string lights and white tablecloths, and my mom dancing to Stevie Wonder in heels. Jake's mother Linda was there in the front row, in a champagne-colored dress that I later found out was more expensive than mine. I didn't mind at the time. She told me I looked beautiful. She hugged me and said, "Welcome to the family, sweetheart." I believed her. The first 3 years of our marriage were genuinely good. I want to be clear about that because it matters. This wasn't a story where I should have seen the warning signs from the start. We traveled, went to Nashville for New Year's, drove to Savannah for my birthday, flew to Denver to see some friends from college one summer. We laughed a lot. We cooked together on Sundays. Jake was handy. He'd fix things around the house, regrout the master bathroom, build a bookshelf from scratch. It made me think of my dad. That probably says something about me. In year 4, we decided to try for a baby. And then in year 4, I lost the baby. I was 11 weeks along. I'd already told my mom. I'd already bought a onesie that said Charlotte's Finest that I'd hidden in the back of my closet because I wanted to surprise Jake with it after the first trimester. I never got to. The miscarriage happened at work. I was in my office at the hospital. I'm a senior administrator at Atrium Health, and I had to call Jake from the break room floor because I couldn't stand up. He came. He held me in that break room for a long time. But then, and here is where I need you to start paying attention, something shifted. Not obviously. Not in a way I could have named at the time. It was the smallest thing, like a single picture frame that's 1 degree off the wall. You don't stop and fix it. You just keep walking. It was 6 weeks after the miscarriage. I'd taken some time off work, used my FMLA, came back at reduced hours, was genuinely trying to take care of myself. Jake had been attentive at first. He'd bring me coffee in the mornings, check in during the day, make dinner sometimes. But by week 6, there was a shift in the texture of things. He was coming home later. Not dramatically late, 30 minutes an hour. But when I'd ask where he'd been, his answers were always slightly too smooth. Traffic on I-77, had to stop by the office, ran into a client at the gas station, and we talked for a while. Each one was totally plausible. Each one had zero detail. I remember one particular evening. It was a Tuesday in February. Cold but not quite cold enough to feel like winter. That gray in-between kind of Charlotte weather where you can't tell what season you're in. I'd made chicken and roasted vegetables for dinner, his favorite actually, and I was sitting at the kitchen table when he came in at almost 8 o'clock. "Hey," I said. "Where were you?" "Had a late showing," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Property over in Dilworth. Took longer than expected." "Which property?" He finally looked up. He smiled, one of those patient, slightly tired smiles that I was starting to notice more. "Just a new listing, nothing finalized, you hungry?" I was. We ate. We talked about other things. And I told myself, "Sarah, you are grieving. You are hypervigilant because loss does that to you. You are reading into nothing because your nervous system doesn't know how to be calm right now. You trust this man. He held you on a break room floor." I talked myself right out of my own instincts. But here's the thing about instincts. They don't care whether you listen to them or not. They keep filing reports. About 2 months after that, I went looking for our property tax statement. We were doing our taxes early because our accountant had asked for documents, and I couldn't find it in the filing cabinet where we kept everything. I found the mortgage statement, the HOA documents, insurance records. But the tax statement was missing. I figured it had been misfiled. I went online to pull it from the county assessor's website, and that's when I noticed something that I didn't fully understand at the time. Our property on Ballantine Commons Drive was there, listed correctly. But I also noticed, just by scanning, a second parcel, same owner name Jake T. Mercer, at an address I didn't recognize. A property on Garrison Road. I closed the laptop. I told myself I'd misread it. Looked up the wrong Jake Mercer. It's not an uncommon name. But I wrote the address down on a post-it note and stuck it in the pocket of my robe. A couple of weeks later, I told my best friend Nicole what I'd seen. Nicole is a paralegal. She's sharp, she's practical, she's exactly who you call when you're not sure if you're losing your mind. We were sitting in her kitchen in No-Da having coffee on a Saturday morning, and I showed her the post-it. She looked at it. Then she looked at me. "Do you want me to search this?" "I don't know what I want." She searched it. Pulled up the Mecklenburg County property records on her laptop right there. And she turned the screen toward me the same way Tiffany would over a year later. That slow pivot, that careful reveal. The property on Garrison Road was owned by Jake T. Mercer and Linda M. Mercer. Filed 2 years prior. Joint deed with right of survivorship. His mother. Nicole reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Did you know about this? No, I said. I had no idea. She sat back. Okay, I want you to think carefully before you do anything. This could be something from before you were married that he never told you about. It could be. Nicole, he bought this 2 years ago. We've been married for 5. She didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. I drove home from Nicole's in a kind of dissociated haze. That's the only way I can describe it. Like someone had turned the volume of the world down, and I was watching everything through slightly smudged glass. I made dinner that night. I sat across from Jake and I watched him eat and talk and laugh at something on TV. And I smiled and responded in all the right places. And the whole time my brain was running one loop on repeat. He bought a property with his mother and never told me. He bought a property with his mother and never told me. He bought a property. I said nothing. I needed to know more before I said anything at all. Once I saw the property record, I couldn't unsee it. It was like one of those optical illusions where you suddenly see the face in the pattern. You cannot unsee it, cannot go back to the way you looked at it before. Every weekend that Jake ran by the office or checked on a property, I thought about Garrison Road. Every time his phone buzzed and he tilted the screen away from me, I thought about Garrison Road. Every time I heard him on the phone with Linda, talking in that particular low voice he used when he thought I wasn't paying attention, I thought about Garrison Road. I started being deliberate about what I looked at and when. I'm not a snooping kind of person. I genuinely wasn't before this. But I also am not the kind of person who will keep lying to herself when she knows something is wrong. I went through the phases that I think a lot of women go through. First, you look for reasons it's innocent. Then, when the reasons stop adding up, you start looking for the truth. I checked our joint checking account statements going back 2 years. Everything looked roughly normal. Our regular deposits, our regular bills, the mortgage payment, groceries, utilities. Nothing obviously missing. But then I started noticing something. Jake's personal contributions to the account had been lower the last 18 months than they were the year before. Not drastically, maybe $400 or $500 a month less. He'd explained this away the previous fall by saying his commission structure had changed, that some of his listings had pushed to the next fiscal year. At the time, I'd accepted it without scrutiny because I had more than enough of my own income to cover our expenses. Now I was looking at those numbers differently. I'm good with money. I've always been good with money. I handle a multi-million-dollar operational budget at work. I'm meticulous with spreadsheets. I think in systems. So I built one. I went back through every monthly bank statement I could access, every credit card transaction, every utility bill. I built a spreadsheet and I laid it all out. And when I looked at that spreadsheet, when I really looked at it, what I saw was a slow, methodical, nearly invisible diversion of money away from our shared life. 400 here, 600 there. A pattern of cash withdrawals, always on Fridays, always between $200 and $500. Small enough that I wouldn't have noticed casually. Large enough over 18 months to add up to something real. I needed to know where that money was going. And the only way to find out was to get closer to the source. Jake's home office was a room we'd converted from a 4th bedroom. He had a big L-shaped desk, filing cabinets, a whiteboard he used for deal flow. I worked from home sometimes too, so it wasn't unusual for me to be in there. But I'd never gone through his things. That felt like a line. Until the day it didn't anymore. One afternoon while he was out, at the gym, supposedly, though the GPS on our shared Find My location had him somewhere on the south side of Charlotte for 45 minutes before the gym appeared. I went into his office and I opened the filing cabinets. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect from someone in commercial real estate. Property files, lease agreements, market analyses, business cards bundled with rubber bands. But in the bottom drawer of the second cabinet, behind a manila folder labeled Insurance 2021, I found a folder I didn't recognize. Inside was a bank statement, a single-page printout, for an account I had never seen before. The account holder was listed as J.T. Mercer Properties, LLC. I sat down on the floor of his office, and I read that statement 3 times. The account had a balance of over $47,000. There were monthly deposits, 12 of them, 1 per month, consistent amounts, that I calculated were exactly what you'd collect from a 2-bedroom rental property in that part of Charlotte. Garrison Road. He was collecting rent. He'd been collecting rent for at least a year, probably longer, since this was just one statement. On a property I didn't know existed, depositing it into a business account under an LLC I didn't know he'd formed, and never once mentioning any of it to me. I took a picture of the statement with my phone. Then I put it back exactly where I found it, behind the insurance folder, at the same angle, with the same slight fold in the top left corner. I went into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood at the sink, looking out the backyard at the patio furniture we'd picked out together at a Home Depot in Pineville, thinking, I am married to a stranger. That night, Jake came home from the gym smelling like his own soap and nothing else, which I found both relieving and infuriating. He made small talk. He asked about my day. He fixed a leaky faucet in the guest bathroom because that's what he does. He fixes things. He fixes things and he's handy and he's good-natured, and he will look you right in the face while the water drips. My friend Nicole, when I called her the next day, told me to slow down. Before you confront him, she said, you need to know everything. Don't give him the chance to minimize, to explain, to make you feel crazy. You go in knowing everything or you don't go in at all. She was right. I wasn't ready yet, but I was getting there. 2 more weeks passed. During those 2 weeks, I did 3 things. First, I called the Mecklenburg County Register of Deeds and confirmed the property on Garrison Road. Yes, it existed. Yes, it was jointly owned by Jake and Linda. Yes, it had been filed during our marriage. Second, I found a real estate attorney named Marcus Webb, a friend of a friend, and I had a preliminary conversation, which I told him was for a client, even though it wasn't. He told me that property acquired during a marriage in North Carolina is generally considered marital property, regardless of whose name is on the deed. But that documenting the concealment would be critical if this ever became a legal matter. Third, I drove by Garrison Road. I almost didn't. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Walmart 3 miles away for 20 minutes before I made myself do it. I don't know what I expected to feel. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just needed to see it with my own eyes. I drove down Garrison Road slowly. The house was a small brick ranch, well-maintained, with a navy blue front door and a crepe myrtle in the front yard that someone had trimmed back for the season. There was a car in the driveway. Lights on inside. Someone was living there, paying Jake money every month to live in that house, while I worked double shifts and thought we were saving for our future. And then, and I want you to really feel this, I looked at that front porch, and I felt something happen in my chest that I couldn't explain at first. Something that didn't have a name yet. Because I recognized that house. I had been inside that house. Not recently. Not for a long time. But when I was 8 years old, I had sat on that front porch and eaten a popsicle on a summer afternoon while my father talked to the man who owned it. Because that brick ranch on Garrison Road had been in my family's neighborhood growing up, not our house, but close. And it had been sold years before my father died, when the original owners relocated to Florida. I sat in my car outside, and my hands were shaking, and I kept thinking, Jake knew. Jake knew what this house was. Jake had known where I grew up, I told him. I'd driven him through my hometown once, early in our relationship, the kind of tour you give the person you love. Had I pointed out that house? Had I mentioned it? I couldn't remember. But Jake was a man who remembered things. Jake was a man who filed information away and retrieved it when it became useful. The question that lodged itself in my brain, the one that kept me awake for nights after, was this: had he bought that house on purpose? Was it coincidence? Or had he looked at that house and thought, she'll never fight me for something with this much pain attached to it? I didn't know. Not yet. But I was going to find out. The moment I saw everything clearly happened in a mortgage broker's office on a Wednesday afternoon in March. Here's how I got there. We'd been talking for months about refinancing our Ballantine house. Interest rates had dipped, and Jake had been the one to push for it. He said we could lower our monthly payment and free up cash flow. I'd agreed. I'd gathered all my documents. I actually put together a tidy little folder: pay stubs, tax returns, our existing mortgage information, credit reports. I was ready. I felt, walking into that office, like a person who had her life together. The broker was named Tiffany, young, professional American flag pin on her blazer. I sat down across from her, and she started pulling records. And after maybe 5 minutes of routine questions and clicking, her expression changed. Mrs. Mercer, she said carefully, can I ask you about the property on Garrison Road? My stomach dropped to the floor. I kept my face neutral. What about it? It's showing up in your husband's name and another party as co-owner. For the refinance on your primary residence, we'll need to account for any other real estate assets. It affects the debt-to-income calculation. She paused. Were you aware of this property? Walk me through what you're seeing, I said instead of answering. She turned the monitor toward me. And there it was, the official, public record, undeniable truth, in black and white with a county seal at the top. Jake T. Mercer and Linda M. Mercer. Joint deed. Filed 3 years into our marriage. And then Tiffany clicked something else and said, there's also an LLC associated with your husband's name, J.T. Mercer Properties. It looks like it holds a rental lease on the Garrison Road property. Were you aware of that as well? I looked at that screen for a very long time. No, I said. I was not aware of any of this. Tiffany took her glasses off. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, gently, would you like to pause this appointment and come back with your husband? No, I said again. I'd like to understand the full picture first. She nodded. She was kind. She printed everything out, the property record, the LLC filing, the rental lease information that was part of the public record. She slid it across the desk in a neat stack and she said, these are public records. You have every right to them. I thanked her. I walked out to my car. I sat in the parking garage, and I opened that folder and I looked at every page. There was one page I hadn't expected. A copy of the original deed of sale, the purchase of the Garrison Road property 3 years ago. And in the section where the buyer explains the source of funds, it listed a wire transfer from a private account. An account whose routing number I recognized, because I'd memorized it from the statement I'd found in Jake's filing cabinet. He'd used money from that secret LLC account to buy the house. Money that, based on the dates, he'd been accumulating since early in our marriage. Which meant this wasn't an impulse. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a strategy. Slow, patient, deliberate. Built over years, while we were having Sunday dinners and taking drives to Asheville and trying to have a baby. And the house he'd chosen, the one he'd sunk that money into, that he'd listed in his mother's name so it would never appear in our shared finances, was the house on my childhood street. The one I'd pointed out to him on a driving tour of my hometown 6 years before, when I'd told him my dad used to know the family who lived there. When I'd said, that whole block feels like my dad to me. He had heard that. He had filed it. And years later, when he was building his exit strategy, he had bought it. I sat in that parking garage for a long time. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere below, a car alarm went off and then stopped. I thought about my dad. I thought about his handshake theory, the idea that how you take care of your home tells people everything about your character. Then I thought Jake had been taking such meticulous care of his house. His real house. The one I didn't know about. The one he'd built for himself, slowly, quietly, while I slept beside him every night and thought we were building it together. I drove home. Jake wasn't there yet. I walked straight to our bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and I cried. Not the hyperventilating, ugly kind of crying. The quiet kind. The kind where the tears just fall because your body doesn't know what else to do with the information. I cried for my marriage. I cried for the miscarriage that I'd gone through in a hospital bathroom while he was doing what exactly on those late evenings. I cried for my father, who would have recognized Jake for exactly what he was in about 30 seconds. And I cried for the house on Garrison Road, that little brick ranch with the navy blue door that smelled like summer and crepe myrtle, and something I'd lost long before any of this. Then I stopped crying. Because I made a decision. Before we get to what happened next, I have to stop for a second because I need to talk to you. If you've made it this far into this story, you already knew something was wrong. You could feel it. That instinct, that thing that made you keep listening, that's exactly what I was ignoring for way too long. Drop a comment right now. Did you see this coming? Put I knew IT or no way. I genuinely want to know. And tell me where you're tuning in from, because this story is reaching people in places I never imagined, and that matters to me more than I can say. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it right now. I mean it. Every single person who subscribes keeps this channel going, And this community is what makes this work worth doing. I'm so grateful for you. And I need you to stay with me because what I did next. You are not ready. Not even close. After the parking garage, I gave myself 48 hours. 48 hours to feel everything. The anger, the grief, the disorientation, the way your whole body recalibrates when you realize the gravity of your situation is different from what you thought it was. I let myself feel it. I sat with it. I did not make any moves. On the second night, I couldn't sleep. It was around 2 in the morning, and Jake was asleep beside me, and I lay there listening to him breathe and thinking, you are not the woman he thinks you are. He thought I was the woman who missed things, who trusted too much, who was soft from grief and too overwhelmed to look closely. He had built this whole structure, the LLC, the deed, the secret account, the slow financial misdirection, on the assumption that I would not look closely. He was wrong. I got up at 2:30. I went to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water, and I sat at the breakfast table where we had eaten 1,000 meals together, and I made a list. Not an emotional list, a strategic one. I'm an administrator. I think in systems. So I built one. Step 1, document everything. I needed copies of every piece of evidence I'd gathered, photographed, printed, stored somewhere Jake couldn't access. Step 2, money. I needed to understand our full financial picture. What was in the joint account? What was in accounts I could claim as marital assets? What was protected? Marcus, the real estate attorney, had given me the outline. Now I needed a family law attorney. Step 3, the LLC. J.T. Mercer Properties was a North Carolina LLC. LLCs have public filings, registered agent, articles of organization, annual reports. I needed to know every detail about that entity. When it was formed, what assets it held, whether it had ever filed anything that could trace back to marital funds. Step 4, Linda. This was the step that took me the longest to write down. Because Linda wasn't just Jake's mother. She was the co-owner of that property. Her name was on the deed. She had received wire transfers. I'd seen the records from Jake's LLC account, presumably representing her share of whatever arrangement they had. She had known. She had sat at my wedding in her champagne-colored dress and hugged me and said, "Welcome to the family." And she had known. That part, the Linda part, was going to require a different kind of attention. I found my attorney through Marcus, a woman named Dana Holly's family law boutique firm in South Charlotte. She was in her late 40s, natural silver streak in her dark hair, the kind of woman who has heard everything and is surprised by nothing. I called her office the morning after my 2 a.m. list-making session, said it was urgent, and she had a cancellation that afternoon. I brought my folder. I brought my spreadsheet. I brought the photograph I'd taken of the bank statement in Jake's office. I laid it all out in front of Dana, and she leaned back in her chair and looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "How long have you been sitting on this?" "A few weeks," I said. I needed to know the full picture first. She smiled a small, professional smile. That was smart. We talked for 2 hours. Dana walked me through North Carolina's equitable distribution law, the way marital assets are divided in a divorce, the way concealment and dissipation of assets can affect that division, the way a judge tends to feel about a spouse who forms an LLC and funnels rental income into it for years without disclosure. She talked about the property on Garrison Road. Yes, it would likely be considered a marital asset because it was purchased during the marriage regardless of whose name was on the deed, especially given that I could show the funds used to purchase it were derived from income earned during our marriage. And the sentimental aspect, I said carefully. He bought a house that has personal significance to me. Could that be relevant? Dana looked at me. Explain. I told her about my father. I told her about the driving tour. I told her about pointing out that street, that block, that house. I told her my theory. She was quiet for a moment. That's harder to prove in a legal context, she said. But it will matter in a negotiation, because if he bought that house as leverage to hold something painful over you, that says something about intent, and intent matters. I left Dana's office feeling something I had not felt in weeks. Not happy. Not okay. But positioned. Like I finally had my feet under me. My ally in all of this beyond Nicole and Dana was the most unexpected person, my neighbor, Carol. Carol lived 3 houses down. She was in her early 60s, retired, a former regional manager for a big insurance company. She and I had been friendly. She'd bring over sweet potato pie at Thanksgiving. I'd help her carry in groceries sometimes, but we weren't close exactly. Not until the afternoon she knocked on my door and said, very quietly, "I've been wanting to talk to you." She had seen Jake about 8 months earlier, on a Saturday afternoon when I was in Atlanta for a work conference. She'd been sitting on her front porch and she'd seen Jake leave our house, get into his car, and then, 10 minutes later, watched Linda pull up, go inside our house and stay for about 3 hours. Carol had assumed it was a family thing. Hadn't thought twice about it, until she'd seen the same thing happen 2 more times over the following months, always when she'd seen my car absent. She hadn't said anything because she hadn't known what she was seeing. But she'd been uneasy, and she told me she'd been trying to figure out for months whether to say something. "What were they doing in my house?" I asked. "I don't know, sweetheart," she said. "I just know they were there." I thanked Carol. I hugged her on my front porch. I went back inside and I added her to my list, as a witness, if it ever came to that. Things nearly fell apart when Jake came home one evening and found me at his desk. I'd gone back and looking for anything else in that bottom filing cabinet. I heard the garage door before I expected to, and I had about 45 seconds to close the drawer, move to the bookshelf, and pretend to be looking for a phone charger I'd left in here. He walked in, looked at me. I held up an old charger cord. "This mine or yours?" I said. He looked at the cord. "That's mine," he said. "You don't have that model." "You're right," I said. "My bad." I put it down and walked out. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But my face had stayed calm. I was getting very good at calm. I chose a Sunday evening in April for the confrontation. Not spontaneously, deliberately. Jake's mother would be coming for dinner that Sunday. I had known about it for weeks. She came once a month, and for every one of those dinners I'd sat across from Linda and passed her the sweet potato casserole and asked about her book club, while all this time she was the co-owner of a property with her son that I knew nothing about. I wanted her there. I wanted them both in the same room when I laid it all out. I spent that Sunday morning cooking, not because I was trying to be domestic, but because I needed something to do with my hands. I made the full spread: roasted chicken, glazed carrots, cornbread. The house smelled like a home. That felt important. Linda arrived at 4 o'clock. She came in the way she always did, a little proprietary, like she was visiting a house that was partly hers in some way she never said out loud. Which, as it turned out, she believed it was. "Smells amazing, Sarah," she said, putting her coat over the back of a kitchen chair. "Thanks, Linda," I said. "Make yourself comfortable." We ate. I was perfectly normal. I asked about her book club. She told a long story about a dispute in her HOA. Jake talked about a deal he was working on in Dilworth. And the whole time I was sitting there eating cornbread, thinking, not yet. Not yet. Let it play out a little more. After dinner, Jake went to refill his water glass. Linda was sitting at the kitchen table, and I was clearing plates. And I heard myself say, very calmly, very conversationally, like I was asking about the weather, "Linda, how long have you and Jake owned the house on Garrison Road?" The kitchen went very, very quiet. Linda set down her fork. Something crossed her face, not guilt exactly. More like recalibration. The expression of someone who has been caught in a contingency they'd planned for but hoped they wouldn't need. Jake came back in from the counter, and he saw my face and he went still. "Sarah," he started. "I'm asking your mother," I said. Linda looked at Jake. Jake looked at me. "How long?" I said again. My voice was perfectly level. I had practiced this in the car. In the shower. At 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. I had practiced it until the emotion was all the way down below the surface, where it wouldn't interfere with what I needed to do. Linda said, "Jake handles all of that, You signed the deed," I said. "I've seen it, your name is on it, so you know exactly what I'm talking about." Jake put down his water glass. "Sarah, can we talk about this privately?" "No," I said. "We can't, because this involves your mother, and she's right here, and I'd like some honesty from both of you in the same room, just one time." What followed was one of the stranger experiences of my life. Jake went through every stage that you might expect from a person who has been caught. First came denial, or not quite denial, more like minimization. It's just an investment property, it's business, it doesn't have anything to do with us. Second came the pivot to justification. I was protecting our assets. If we ever had financial trouble, I needed something in reserve. I was thinking about our future. Third, when I pulled out the folder, the property record, the LLC filing, the bank statement photograph, came a different kind of silence. The silence of someone who has run out of plays. Linda spoke during the third stage. Jake was just trying to be responsible, she said, and her voice had an edge to it. Not everyone is handed everything, Sarah. Some of us plan. I looked at her for a long moment. Linda, I said. He bought a house on my childhood street. He chose that specific address. I want you to tell me that was a coincidence. Jake's jaw moved. Linda looked at him. And in the look that passed between them, in the fraction of a second before either of them said anything, I got my answer. It wasn't a coincidence. Jake said very quietly, I bought it because it was a good investment. You bought it, I said, because you knew what it meant to me. You bought it so that if this marriage ever fell apart, you'd have something I couldn't easily fight you for. Something with enough pain attached to it that I'd back down. Silence. Am I wrong? I said. He didn't answer. Linda started to say something and I raised one hand, and she stopped. I have spoken to a family law attorney, I said. I have documented everything, the LLC, the property, the rental income, the account, the timeline of purchases. Dana Hollies knows everything I know, and under North Carolina equitable distribution law, everything acquired during this marriage is marital property, including that house. Jake looked up. His expression had shifted, not anger, not denial anymore. Something more complicated. Something that looked almost like relief, which surprised me. Like he'd been carrying a weight he hadn't known how to put down. What do you want? He said. I want the truth, I said. All of it, tonight. And then I want you to talk to your attorney, and I want you to deal with Dana, and I want this done fairly. He nodded. Linda stood up and put on her coat. I watched her do it. She said, and I'll remember this forever. I hope you know what you're doing, Sarah. I do, I said. For the first time in a while, I really do. She left. Jake and I sat at that dinner table until almost midnight. He told me everything. The LLC had been formed 4 years into our marriage, 2 months after the miscarriage. He told himself it was financial planning. Looking at it now, or so he said, he knew it was something else. He'd watched me grieve and he'd felt the distance between us grow. And instead of talking to me, he'd started quietly building an escape hatch. And yes, he admitted it quietly, looking at the tablecloth instead of me. He had remembered what I'd said about that street, about that house, about my dad. He said he hadn't bought it to hurt me. But he hadn't bought it not to hurt me either. He'd bought it because it felt like power. And he was ashamed of that. I believed him when he said he was ashamed. I didn't believe that it changed anything. I moved out 3 weeks later. I stayed with my mom for the first month, then got a condo in Plaza Midwood that had tall windows and a balcony where I could see a sliver of the Charlotte skyline if I leaned the right way. It was mine. Just mine. The divorce took 8 months. Dana was extraordinary. We reached a settlement that included a financial accounting for the rental income Jake had collected and concealed, a portion of which came back to me as marital assets, and an agreement that the Garrison Road property would be sold, with the proceeds split equitably. Jake could keep the LLC. He just had to come clean to it, account for it, and deal with the consequences. Linda and I have not spoken since that Sunday dinner. I don't expect we will. Jake and I had one conversation about 6 months after the divorce was final. He called me not to relitigate anything, he said, just to say he was sorry. It was a short call. He sounded tired. I told him I appreciated the call, and I meant it, and I hung up. The Garrison Road house sold in the fall. Whoever bought it painted the front door red. When I drove by it one afternoon, just once, just to see, I sat outside for a minute and looked at that red door and I thought about my dad. About his handshake theory. I hope the new people take good care of it. As for me, I am different now. Quieter in some ways. More careful with trust. But not closed. I want to be clear about that. I am not someone who believes that one betrayal is evidence of a pattern in the whole world. What Jake did was Jake. What Linda did was Linda. And what I did, what I chose to do, was not let it make me smaller. I went back to full hours at work. I got a promotion 6 months after the divorce, senior VP of operations. I have a balcony with a view and a very good book club, and a cat named Dolly who sleeps at the foot of my bed, and has no complicated feelings about property ownership whatsoever. Nicole came over for wine on the night the settlement was finalized. She brought a bottle of champagne and 2 plastic flutes like she was on a budget, which she is not, it was just funny. We drank champagne out of plastic cups in my new kitchen, and she said, "You know what you did, right?" "What?" "You did exactly what he didn't think you'd do. You looked closely." I thought about that for a long time after she left. I still think about it. Here's what I know now that I didn't know then. The most dangerous thing in a relationship isn't the big dramatic betrayal. It's not the explosive fight or the obvious lie. It's the slow erosion, the gradual, careful way someone can redirect your reality while you're looking somewhere else, while you're grieving, while you're trusting, while you're doing the grocery run and making the Sunday dinners, and believing, with everything you have, that you are building something together. The protection against that erosion isn't suspicion. It's not paranoia. It's just attention. It's looking at your own life with the same care you'd give to anything that matters to you. Not because the person beside you is a threat, but because you deserve to know your own story. My dad used to say that a man's house is his handshake. I think about that differently now. Because the house you build isn't just walls and a deed. It's how you show up for the people inside it. It's whether your name on something means you were really there. Whether the foundation is honest or just appears to be. Jake had a beautiful handshake. He fixed things. He showed up. He was warm in all the ways that mattered on the surface. But the house he was actually building, the one he poured all his real thought and energy into, was one that had no room for me in it. I have my own house now. My name is on it. Just mine. And I have never felt more at home. Thank you for sitting with me through this. I mean that with everything I have. This is not an easy story to tell, and it wasn't an easy year to live through, but knowing that you're out there listening makes it feel like it means something. Like all of it happened so I could sit here and hand it to you, and maybe you'd take something from it that helps. We have listeners in over 80 countries now. 80 countries. I don't say that to brag. I say that because every time I think about it, I'm genuinely moved. This story, my story, reaching someone in their kitchen in Lagos, or their commute in London, or their living room in Nashville, or wherever you are right now. That's extraordinary to me. So wherever you are in this world tonight, thank you for being here. If this story mattered to you, please share it. I really believe that someone in your life needs to hear it today. Not just for the drama, but for the message at the end. Someone who's been ignoring their instincts. Someone who's been talking themselves out of what they know. Share it with them. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. Hit that button. This channel is a mission, not a business, and every single subscriber is a vote that stories like this one deserve to be told. Take care of yourselves, y'all. The truth always finds a way.